Hello and welcome everyone to the CRM MVP podcast, episode number 100. It's hard to believe that we've made it this far, 100 episodes in a row. I think that, when I started this show back in May of 2017, I never really knew how long I was gonna, go for it. I think it was the need for the podcast, for the show, didn't come from kind of having a goal on the number of episodes or length of time. It was more about, as long as there's something to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it, on the air. Like, let's just hit record and kind of think about it as it goes. I want it to be very conversational. This show has never really had a script or anything that we follow, as you know. And, I always like to put out like whatever comes to mind in the moment of it. So for this episode, number 100, I kind of debated about what to talk about. I debated to just kind of ignore it. 100 is a number and we should just do an episode about dynamics or the Power Platform or whatever. There's so much to talk about now. Or just do a show about, something else, especially some of the things that have been requested over time that I feel that I haven't really delivered for one reason or another. And I think that the best way to approach it, because there's so many different shows, nowadays that can tell you all about dynamics in the Power Platform and all of that. It seems like everyone is coming out with a show. I think the best thing to do is just to commemorate this 100th episode of the CRM MVP podcast is that we talk about the show. I want to share some information about the show that I haven't really talked about before. This information is not really interesting or valuable if you don't really care about the actual show and about me in particular and some of the other hosts that have been on the show, guests on the show in the past. If you just want to continue to learn about dynamics and the Power Platform and all of that, this might not be the best episode to do that. But I wanted to talk about the show because I do get questions once in a while about it. In some cases, the questions comes from MVPs that perhaps have their own show and they sort of want to understand, what makes this show or the details about it behind the scenes. And sometimes it comes from people that are non-MVPs that just want to learn more about the show. So I kind of put together a list of things that we can tackle and kind of just give you a bunch of information all at once. I have no idea how long this episode is going to be. I definitely don't want to drag it just to make it, an hour or an hour and a half. And this will not be any record-breaking episode where, we're going to go longer than everything I've ever made. No, this will just be probably a short conversation about what makes up this show and what can you do as well to, drive it a little bit, to give direction to the show, because in a lot of regards, a lot of the things that we talk about here come from you guys, the listeners and the MVPs and the people that are, guests on the show. I am quick to react in some cases to suggestions that come from the audience, and in some other cases, I haven't really reacted quick enough or at all. So I wanted to talk about that. So the CRM MVP podcast started in 2017, and it started because in 2017, Microsoft released the new kind of certification exams and all of that. It was kind of a switch. We had the CRM exams in the past. I think the 2015 were the last ones, and it's been around for a couple of years at that point, and then the new version came out. And, Microsoft released them, and there were a lot of just people making comments about it. In some cases, I even listened to other shows that talked about the certification process. And again, the shows that I was listening to are hosted by people that are not involved in the certification process. They have never been involved in the certification process or training as a whole. And they were making all these claims about how Microsoft, wanted to do things this way or that way, or they wanted to make sure people didn't pass or whatever. Like they were just making all these outrageous claims. And I was sort of like, as a person that has been involved in the process of creating courses and creating exams for years, and I participated in I don't know how many exams at this point, either writing questions or evaluating the validity of those questions and whatnot. I wanted to kind of share my perspective kind of on the air and talk about what I knew about the program without really giving away too much, because we have an NDA, of course, with Microsoft. And, that's kind of how the show was born. And, after that, we started kind of gaining some momentum, because one of the main things that I decided to do with the CRM MVP podcast is that I didn't want to focus too much on the latest and greatest. Like, I didn't want to be the show that every 2 weeks is like, oh, let me tell you exactly what's the new little thing that Microsoft came up with. I know that in some cases it's hard to avoid the news. We want to talk about situations where Microsoft is, for example, discontinuing things or deprecating, which is the word they use, deprecating functionality. I like to bring that up and essentially, tell people, for example, look, if you're using this functionality, Microsoft announced that they're going to be discontinuing or deprecating this functionality, I don't know, next year, in 6 months, tomorrow, whatever it is. I like to, in some cases, talk about that, because I think that we have the power to make people aware of what's coming and I guess influence the direction for some organizations that have CRM administrators and work with partners that listen to the show. So in some cases, I have shared news, but it's definitely not every episode or every other episode for that matter. We try to stay away from that. I try to really focus on topics that you can listen to a year from the time the episode aired, and you will be okay. And that's another difference. You can go back and listen to every single one of our episodes, every single one of the 100 plus episodes, because we have released a couple of special like interviews and stuff like that were not numbered. But you can listen to every single episode we've ever released. I don't like to remove them because I think that you can still go back and listen to episode 1, Training and Readiness was the title of it, and get value from it, because Microsoft still follows kind of the same process and procedure. So because of that, the topics that I select for the show, I try to make them kind of longer lasting. I know that eventually everything is obsolete, but I try to make the episodes long lasting that way. And because of that, I think we became popular. People started, tuning in and kind of hearing what I have to say and other MVPs that are on the show have to say. And so far, we have been listened to, or people from 112 different countries have listened to the show, which is amazing. It's way more than I ever expected. I thought that perhaps, 10 different countries or so were going to listen to it, including the US and Canada, and kind of like some of the people that knew me, but obviously the popularity grew along the way. And so far we have listeners in 112 countries. Not every 112, I was looking at the statistics, not every 112 listen to every show, but 70 countries seems to be the magic number that, tunes into every show. So every time one of these goes out, I have listeners, or we have listeners from 70 different countries, at least. Some episodes have more than that. Of course, some episodes have less, but that seems to be the number, which is pretty awesome. And when I think about, I don't know how many countries are in the world. I think it's a little over 200, 210, probably something like that. The fact that 112 countries have listened to our show is mind-boggling. Half the countries in the world, which is pretty awesome. And I want to thank all the people that obviously tune in and share the episodes with others, and all of the guests that we've had on the show, and being willing to share all that information. Out of the 100 episodes we have released so far until when I'm recording this episode, which is basically the day before it goes live on March 6th of 2021, we've had 95,773 downloads. So that is about I always average about 800 downloads per episode, but that would be 80,000 for the 100 episodes. So it's a little bit more than that. So I guess it's 950 or so downloads per episode on average. Obviously, there's a bunch of episodes that we have that are over 1,000, and then there's a bunch of other ones that are under 1,000. So that's why the average is right about 950. So 95,773 downloads out of 99 episodes, I guess, because this one hasn't released. I assume that once this one releases, we'll go over 96,000, which will then bring the average to about 960 downloads per episode, which is pretty accurate. It's about what I expect out of episodes in the long term, which is great. I was hoping that we hit the 100,000 downloads around the same time as we hit 100 episodes because I wanted to do a giveaway. I still don't know what I'm going to give away. I do have a lot of stuff that is Dynamics related and Power Platform related. Some of it is pretty exclusive, like it was either given to me or I had the opportunity to buy it as an MVP, kind of behind the scenes. And it wasn't really a public sale of things. Like I have a really nice glass with like the Power Platform products logos in it. I have several things that are still brand new and I've never really used that would be cool to give away. I don't know really how to do that. Like if, like I said, we have listeners in 112 countries. So if somebody from, I don't know, Sri Lanka wins something, especially if it's heavy, I don't know how I will make sure you get this, but, we'll try to come up with an idea of something that we can give away that is meaningful and we give it away to the listeners that have been tuning in for a long time. So I'm going to try to make it a contest of some kind and, pick some winners and then ship some stuff. Obviously, I have stickers and t-shirts and things like that I can send out, but I want to try to put together some special things, special prices for when we go over 100,000. So we're pretty close. Like I said, 95,773. After this, it will be 96,000 or so. So 4,000 downloads, which is, I don't know, a month or two. We'll see when that happens. And then we'll have more details on the giveaway. It was a lot easier before when conferences were still happening, and I got to meet a lot of people that listen to the show, and I was able to give out things just when I was at the conferences. But now that we're all virtual, it's a little bit harder. So we'll see what kind of idea we come up with. Out of the 112 countries, again, that have tuned into the show, I do have the list of all the countries. So I wanted to share kind of the top 10 countries that tune in to the show. Number 1, the United States. It's not a surprise. Obviously, that's where I live, and a lot of people share, the information, share the links, and reach out from the United States. Is number 1 by far, by the way. About 40,000 downloads came from the U.S., and then second will be the UK. So United Kingdom is second with 10,000, so over 10,000. So United States has almost 4 times the number from the second country in the list, or on the list, which is the UK. Third is Canada. Number 4 is Australia. So Australia coming in fourth. Then Germany, Denmark, which is awesome because I've never been there. I want to go to Denmark. Sweden, India coming in number 8, Netherlands number 9, and number 10 to wrap up the list is South Africa. South Africa pretty close to Netherlands actually, to take for number 9. So pretty awesome, right? So we have countries on the top 10 from almost every continent. We have Africa, we have Asia, we have Australia on the list, North America. We don't have anyone from South America on the list up until number 19, which is Brazil. So Brazil is country number 19 on the list. Thank you everyone listening from Brazil. They are the first country from South America, but there is again 112 countries, so the list is pretty long, and I'm very thankful for everyone who tunes in every 2 weeks to listen to this show, and I'm looking forward to hopefully visit you all and do a session or do a in-person type of session or a presentation or whatever. I love to do these kind of episodes, but on live with people in the audience asking questions. That's awesome. It's my favorite. The other thing I wanted to talk about on the show is the top 10 episodes ever in terms of downloads, or the most popular episodes. This is a request that came from a few people when I asked about what should I focus on for episode number 100. They said, how about you do the top 10 episodes and just kind of like revisit them and all of that. Interestingly enough, I don't know why, but the series between episode 50 and 65 or 70, let's just say, those 20 episodes are like the most popular episodes. That when I look at the list of top 10 episodes, most of them are from the 50s and 60s. And you know, it's interesting to see that. So I wanted to cover that, talk about the top 10 episodes, and kind of give you like a 1 or 2 minute review of it if you haven't listened to it, a summary of it, and also, you know, what I think about that episode and where we're now. All right, so number 10 is episode number 56 on the list. It's called Brace Yourselves, 400 plus new features are coming. I think I recorded this episode. By the way, I have no notes about this. I'm going out of memory, so if I make a mistake, I apologize. But I think I recorded this episode with Juka, which is, I've said it multiple times, my favorite blogger in terms of Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. So I was really happy that he joined the call, or the episode, and co-hosted with me. But basically we talked about all of these features that are coming, and it was either Juka or Steve. Now I think maybe Steve Mordew was it. But anyway, it was one of the two of them. I think it was Juka. And we talked about, you know, all of the features that were being released, and I think this was for the October of 2019 release, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, there was just a lot of features coming. And I think 2019, if I'm not mistaken, was the first year where we had officially 2 release cycles, which were where we had April and October, and we knew what was coming. And they were doing a much better job, the team at Microsoft, to really being clear about, here are all the things that are coming up. Here are, you know, all of the features that you should look forward to, and just being, you know, enhanced clarity essentially in communication with customers and partners alike. So that was an interesting episode. I think it's interesting that it is the 10th episode on the list, because it's one of those, the very, very few episodes that was kind of news based, meaning the features are coming. You know, let me tell you what's coming so you can prepare. And it came out in June, you know, getting people ready for the October release. But the fact that it's still getting downloads is kind of interesting, because these features have been out for over a year at this point. Or at least a lot of these features have been out for over a year. Some of them were kind of delayed and released later on, like January of 2020 or that kind of thing. So they've been out for over a year, but it's still getting downloads, and people, you know, like to tune into that. So that's an interesting observation, I guess. And I wonder sometimes if we should continue to do these episodes for every release, like 2 months before the release comes out. So for example, right now would be a good time to do one for the April release and just talk about all the features that are coming, and maybe do a top 10 of just like, what am I looking forward to? And I get it. They are kind of against the principles that I mentioned about, which is having episodes that are not based on news, but we only have 2 releases a year. So if out of the 20-something episodes we do, 2 of them are news-based, you know, that will help you prepare better for the releases, then I think that's a good trade-off. So I'm thinking that we should probably make this twice a year kind of episode, and maybe I get to host it with Yuka, you know, both episodes, and, you know, just put it on the calendar and go over it. So this is an open call to him so he can help me host these shows. All right, so that was episode 56, which was 10th on the list. Number 9 on the list is episode 55, which is right next to it. Like I mentioned, these 50s and 60s are all over the list. So episode 55 is titled Building Your Personal Brand Like an MVP. And I think we had this episode with Mark Smith, and we had, I don't know if Neil Benson was part of that. We had several basically MVPs going over this, and this is all about building a personal brand in terms of, you know, being a thought leader and being someone who's recognized in the industry as a go-to person for, you know, to essentially provide expertise, to provide an opinion about changes or things that are coming up. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with being noticed in the community. And this episode was kind of our attempt to, share best practices and what makes those of us that were, collaborating in this episode to host it together, what makes us successful when it comes to having a personal brand. When people think about your name, what do they think about? When people think about, I don't know, CRM chart guy, Ulrich Carlson, what do they think about? Charts, right? And he's an expert in business intelligence and all of that. So how do you build a brand like that is what we wanted to talk about on that episode. Still very relevant, so you can go back and listen to that and learn a ton of stuff because that's still very relevant today. And the more things change, people that build brands that are, built on technology that is, dying essentially, they have to kind of reinvent themselves. Like there's a lot of people out there, for example, that were absolute, behemoths in the world of, let's say, the ERP solutions that Microsoft used to have before finance and operations, right? So you had all of these different solutions out there that had Microsoft MVPs, that had, experts, and then they were kind of gone. And as Microsoft went into Business Central and finance and operations. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself as well. And again, that episode talks about that. All right, number 8 on the list is episode 61. It's called Here We Go Again with Licensing Changes. And I think this one I hosted with Steve Mardu because, once again, Microsoft was introducing licensing changes. I remember that I'm trying to remember what event it was. But there was an event that I was at, a conference where the Microsoft leadership was on stage. And it was an event where you get to submit questions. They have this system. I remember that Tony Stein was hosting it, so it has to be like a UG summit of some kind. And you have a system where from your phone you can submit questions and people can upvote them. And Microsoft has to answer, like the questions that get most upvotes, they have to answer them, right? Whether they like it or not. And I can tell Tony, like in some questions would come up and he's like, I don't know if I should ask this question. But I mean, if it keeps getting upvoted and upvoted, he would have to bring it up. And one of the questions that I asked on that event was, what are the chances that this year we're not going to have licensing changes? Because the year was just starting at that point. And again, I don't remember. I think this was the UG Summit in Europe because it's the one that happens early in the year. The US one is the one that happens in October. Or maybe it was in the US and I was asking, like, for next year, what are the chances that now that you've introduced all these licensing changes, things are not going to change? And they were sort of like 0%. There's no chance that whatever we just introduced, which is something we talked about back in 2019, and this episode came out in September of 2019, there is zero chance that we're not going to change something. And it is true. Like, licensing changes all the time. And in some cases, it changes for like way better than it used to be. And in some cases, it changes for just making things more complicated than it used to be. The benefit of the licensing changes, and one thing I will give Microsoft though, even on the ones that we consider them to be not as successful changes or negative changes, if you want to see them that way, about licensing, is that they never just cut you off. Like, if you agree to a license, like if you look at a license and you agree not just with the price, but you agree with what can you do with a license and how much access to stuff you have. Like, it's a read and write, it's a read only, how much storage you're going to get. Like, all of that stuff, like once you agree to it, Microsoft will not just take it away. At least that is my understanding and my opinion from what I've seen with customers. Now, there are some features in the past that you could make an argument and say, like, well, when I signed up, we had this feature and now we don't have it. Like, somebody could say, the main reason, the number one reason why I signed up for this license is because I had the Outlook client and now the Outlook client is deprecated. Okay, that could happen. But what's not going to happen is that you're going to agree to a license that costs, I don't know, $65 a month, and then all of a sudden Microsoft is going to rack it up to $100 a month. That's, all of a sudden. It doesn't work like that. That's not how it happens. It has happened in the past. I've been through several major licensing changes. I think when I started working with CRM Online, it was very new. It wasn't even available in the UK. It was a US only product. And it was $44 a month, I believe. And then when it was made available everywhere, it was increased to $64, I believe. And that included the mobile client and stuff, which a lot of people were paying CWR Mobility for, $15 a month on top of their $44. So it was sort of like break even because they were including the mobility. And then after that, they racked it up to $115, I believe, or I don't know if there was like an 80 in between. And I'm just talking about dollars at this point. And now we have, a huge variety of licenses that we can go to. The last one, by the way, which depending on when you're listening to this might be an amazing feature or not, is that their lowest price license, which is the per app per month license for Power Apps, which is $10 per app per month, which is an amazing plan. And we did a whole episode about this, which is coming up. That episode is in the top 10, by the way. That license right now in 2021 and until the end of June of this year, at least, maybe they'll extend it, but as of now, is till the end of June of 2021. That license, if you buy 200 of them, so 200 apps, it comes down to $3 per app per month, which is unbelievable. So in a lot of cases, depending on who your solution architect is and the partner that you're working with and all of that, if they have the know-how, if they understand how to work the licensing and match that to a solution, you're potentially looking at paying $3 per user per month. Like I know it's a per app. It's not a per user thing. It's a per app license. But if you do it right and give a user one app, you will be paying $3 per user per month, which is unbelievable. And you can say like, but Gus, you said I need 200 at least, but you're paying $3 a month, which means that if you're paying $10 for more than 60 users, that's $600 a month, then it doesn't make sense to have just 60 licenses. It's better to have 200 licenses, because here's what happens. If you buy 200 licenses at $3 a month, then all of the combined availability of resources with each license will be way greater than just having 60 licenses at $10. For example, storage-wise, and we don't have to talk about API calls, and there's a bunch of other things. Let's just focus in storage, for CRM storage specifically, because there's also file storage and log storage. But let's just talk about just the CRM data or the Dataverse data, okay? Every license for this particular level or tier, if you want to see it that way, comes with 50 megs of storage. So if you have 60 licenses, you're paying $600 a month. Okay, you're going to have 50 megs multiplied by 60, and whatever that is. So I assume is, let me see, 50 multiplied by 60 equals 3,000. 3,000 divided by 1,000, let's just say, is 3 gigs. So for your 60 licenses, you have 3 gigs of storage, right? But if you have 200, right, now it's 10 gigs of storage instead of 3. And you're paying the same, $600 a month. So if you're not using them all, right, you say, I only have 60 users. Okay, you still pay $600 and you get 10 gigs of storage rather than 3. I mean, that's a lot. It's more than triple the storage that you're going to get. Now, where it starts to get better and better is the more you have over 60. Because if you have 300 users and you were paying $10 a month, now you're paying $3,000 a month instead of $900 a month. It's $3 per user per month. So it's just unbelievable. That is one massive license change that Microsoft made that is only available until the end of June, and it's only available kind of if you know how to get it. So just work with your partner. If you are listening to this on the customer side, work with a partner that knows how to do it, and you can get into that plan, because it's going to go away as of now by the end of June. And, if you get on that plan, by the way, they'll guarantee the price for a year. So it's not like you have to buy all the licenses by June and then you're done. No, if you get on that plan, then you can keep adding licenses later on, like October, November, whenever, at $3 a month. So it's pretty awesome. Really great promotion they're running right now. And, it's a good example of license changes that are beneficial for users and partners alike. A lot of companies that are on premise right now that we're looking, and it's still shocking. And this is, by the way, one of the episodes I want to do. I want to have a few CIOs from different companies and talk about what are the things that they are concerned about, especially if they work in companies where they're using on-premise. So if you can think of a good guest for that show, please reach out to me and let me know. info@crmmvppodcast.com is my email address, because I really want to talk to people about the move from on-premise to online. It's always amazing when I talk to people, some prospects in some cases, I talk to them and they're like, oh, we're having some issues with on-prem. And I'm like, well, why don't we go online? And they're like, oh, no, forget it. Online is so much more expensive. Really? $3 a month per user. I mean, you cannot, if you have on-prem and it never breaks, you probably spend more than $3 a month in electricity alone just to run the servers for those users. So there's just no chance in most cases, in most companies, there's no chance online will be more expensive than on-prem if you know how to do it. That is the asterisk. That is the caveat. You have to know how to do it. If, what happens in a lot of cases is you see a lot of these companies that are using an IT resource or whatever company to run their regular servers, their Active Directory, their Exchange, their SharePoint. And whenever it comes to Dynamics, that company sort of like, oh, we can also do Dynamics. And yes, if you're on-prem, they can probably install it. They can probably do your SQL Server, maybe cluster it. Like they are experts on the technical side. But when it comes to licensing, you kind of need to work with someone who knows what they're doing. And again, I'm not saying I'm the only one or I'm the best one or nothing like that. Just find someone that can help you, because if you're on premise, chances are moving online will cost you way, way, way less than it will cost you to stay on premise. Because again, there's a lot of things about on premise that we have to be mindful about, which is, number one, will it last forever? Will on-premise be around forever? Like, what's stopping Microsoft from stop making on-premise in 5 years from now or 10 years from now or whatever it is? Like, we know the cloud is not going anywhere. The more we hear about Microsoft, the more a new conference comes in, they boast about how much investment they're making in the cloud and new data centers opening. Like, the cloud is not going anywhere. It's not a fad. It's not like, oh, we're just releasing Yammer and then it's going to be dead in a couple. The cloud is not going anywhere. On-prem? I don't know. If I knew that on-prem was going to go away, I couldn't tell you. So I'm just speculating, just like a lot of people are speculating. But it certainly looks like Microsoft is moving towards that pay-as-you-go, software-as-a-service model. Like, right? They want to push everyone, platform as a service, even with the Power Platform, but they're pushing everyone in that direction. So if you continue to wait to move from on-prem to online and not take advantage of the promotions that Microsoft is kind of hinting you and giving you, like, I cannot make it cheaper to you, right? Then later on you might be forced to do so. And of course you can say, well, you know what? If Microsoft does that, if they don't do on-premise anymore, I'll just go somewhere else. Okay, who? Because every other CRM solution out there is cloud only. They don't even have on-premise. So what are you going to do? Are you going to create your own custom CRM solution? Okay, you can do that. You can spend millions of dollars to have developers kind of recreate CRM so you run it online. You run it on premise. And of course, you won't pay licenses for that because you own it up front, but it costs millions of dollars. And then every time your company evolves, every time they acquire another company, every time they do something, you have to spend hundreds of thousands probably just to update the software so it stays with the company and the evolution of the company. So that is a huge pain. Okay, so once again, I don't even know what we were talking about and how we got here, but for sure, start looking into moving from on-prem to online, and we were talking about licensing. So anyway, all right. The next on the list is episode number 63. Here's what you need to know about AI, the Power Platform, and CDS. All right, and once again, this was an episode, I believe this was hosted by, I think this is actually me and Scott Sewell, probably. We had an interview. I was in New York for, something personal, a family matter or whatever. And I know Scott was living in New York City at that time. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, man, you want to talk about AI and stuff? And he was like, absolutely. So I went and we recorded this whole conversation back in 2019 once again. And, it's great because Scott is a former MVP, one of the OGs, right? The original crew, always still do look up to Scott. He's amazing, super smart. And, when I met with him to record this episode, he had been working for Microsoft now for a while at that point, and he had a huge new perspective. That is one thing that as MVPs we lack or we don't see, is that internal behind closed doors kind of conversations and direction that sometimes the global black belts and all the other internal Microsoft employees have access to. We as MVPs have access to some of it. I mean, Microsoft makes a decision to bring us in and get our opinion and help us essentially see where they're going so we can then help them make sure the software matches what the customers and everyone else is kind of expecting out of it. So it's a good relationship, but there are some other discussions that they're having internally that we're not part of. I mean, there's a lot of things, and I mentioned this in previous episodes before. There's a part of it, a lot of it that we find out exactly at the same time as everyone else, right? They make an announcement and we're sort of like, oh, cool. Like we just found out with everyone else. And, that's the way it works. So that was a good conversation with Scott. So definitely check that out. All right, next on the list is episode 52. Here's the story of a project disaster. So episode 52 was our 2-year anniversary episode, and I wanted to kind of step outside the norm at that point and talk about a project that happened a long time ago before Dynamics CRM even existed. So it's not really a disaster. There was a Dynamics disaster. It was a CRM project disaster. I think the CRM project that they were installing was Siebel, actually. And it was just a total disaster. It ended up going for way longer, hundreds of millions of dollars, higher than the original estimate, thousands and thousands of hours, lawsuits. I mean, it was just horrific. And I kind of covered it very, very, short, I guess. I mean, I think I talked about it for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes maybe. And like, there's so much interesting stuff from that project that you could do a whole series about it. Like I could start a separate show and do 10, 15, 20 episodes of just that one project because there's a lot of information out there because of the lawsuits. So a lot of information became public, and that's why, it's so interesting to see it. Now, the reason why I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, I didn't make it a series and make it multiple episodes, is because I really wanted to focus on the things that went wrong with that project and the things that we can learn from it for our Dynamics implementations. Even though it wasn't a Dynamics project, I wanted to just talk about, here are the things that went wrong that are applicable to our own implementations and kind of ignore the rest. But the rest is bananas. It's crazy. I don't kind of discard the idea of perhaps doing something with this in the future. I just don't know how many people would welcome this being on this show instead of being on a separate thing, because again, if you do it right, you really have to spend at least 8 hours or so to tell the story, and 8 hours are 8 episodes, and that's about 4 months worth of content. And I think that most people that listen to the show, just based on the list alone of top 10 episodes, would just get bored after episode 2 and not, kind of unsubscribe from the show. So that's not what I want. But if you think otherwise, please let me know. Like I said, I'm very easy to convince when it comes to making requests and what people want to listen to, because again, the story of this project is a very, very interesting story of just nonsense, right? It's crazy. So we might talk about that in the future. Next on the list is episode number 57, which is the top 10 Dynamics 365 things you need to replace immediately. And I talked about this back in July of 2019. And this was, basically just me talking about, here's all these features that people are still using and features that need to be replaced. Either A, because they're going to be deprecated, or B, because they're awful and no one should use them. Okay? So that's basically what the episode was about. I still think most of the things on this episode are relevant, by the way. And you should go back and listen to it and perhaps replace some of these that are, are still around even after, a year and a half. So this episode has been out for a year and a half, or a little bit over a year and a half. And there's still some of these that are hard to die, but you should definitely go back and listen and replace them immediately. The only episode on the list from 2018 is number 4 on the top 10 is managed versus unmanaged. Everyone loves this conversation. This is, everyone's favorite episode, because essentially it was 5 MVPs in a room talking about the value of managed solutions versus unmanaged solutions. And not only that, but kind of questioning that best practice from Microsoft and other experts as well. Microsoft is not the only one that talks about how we should do our ALM, our application lifecycle management, which is mainly focused in managed solutions. And, those of us who don't necessarily follow that direction, follow that for every project, we believe that in some cases, most cases, if you ask me, unmanaged solutions makes more sense. Not everyone is a fan of this episode, especially not everyone at Microsoft, because I'm, openly criticizing their best practice. Obviously, they have the reasons to push for this best practice. I have my reasons to push against it, and we've never really seen eye to eye on that. One of the biggest feedbacks that I got about this episode was people, a lot of people just pouring in their stories about problems they've had with managed solutions, and then some other people obviously pouring in their stories of things they avoided because they work with managed solutions and follow the best practices. So it was just a great all-around experience to hear from each other. I wasn't swayed to go to team managed, after my discussion. As a matter of fact, this episode was followed by total open discussion during the CRMEG Summit, and I think it was in Nashville. We had a session called Managed versus Unmanaged. We had something like, 15 MVPs or something. Like, everyone who was at the event and not presenting at that time came and had a discussion. Everyone except Jonas. So Jonas Rapp, who is one of my favorite people on earth, was at this session, but he was sitting in the audience just nodding his head like no, just telling me like no, you don't know what you're talking about. And I heavily respect Jonas. I just think that he's wrong on this one. But shout out to Jonas. He's had a rough couple of weeks just in his personal life, and I love that guy. I really, really hope that things get better. So if you're listening to this, Jonas, I'm rooting for you for sure. All right, the third episode on our top 10 list, so number 3 on the list, is the end of Dynamics 365 as we know it. This episode came up on April of 2019, and it was basically this was a direct result of the licensing changes that Microsoft put in place in terms of the Power Apps and the Power Platform. This is when they introduced that $10 a month, right after they introduced the $10 a month licenses, and how a few of us, and I think we had Mark Smith, Steve Mordew, Kuba Skalvania, who's an MVP from Poland, has been implementing Dynamics for a long time as well. Very, very knowledgeable. All of us got together and talked about how the new licensing changes literally ended the way we all approach implementing Dynamics 365. So it ended Dynamics 365 implementations from our perspective. And since then, I almost never have implemented Dynamics 365. It's always been a Power Platform implementation, more specifically a Power Apps implementation, because I want to be able to pass those savings to my customers, right? Instead of paying $95 per user per month, you should pay $10. And we can use that money to enhance the solution if you have a budget, rather than just paying it in licenses for features that we don't really use. And by the way, Microsoft does not frown upon this, right? Microsoft doesn't say like, don't listen to him, you should just pay the $95. No, Microsoft says, don't pay us full price if you're not going to use the stuff. Now, what we don't want you to do, it's either A, pay $10 and use the stuff, which means violating licensing, which means you can get audited and get a fine, and totally destroy your relationship with Microsoft. Or B, pay the $10 a month and then spend $1 million in consulting, recreating functionality that you can have access for $95 a month. So what Microsoft is saying is, look, if you need all this stuff that we created, like if you need to use the entire product catalog from the sales app, trying to recreate the product catalog, all of it, would cost you millions of dollars. Like, don't recreate it. Don't recreate the case functionality. Don't recreate field service, the entire app. That costed millions of dollars and thousands of hours of development. So instead of doing that, use what Microsoft created, or rent it, if you want to see it that way, for $95 per user per month, which in a lot of cases, it makes sense. But what happens is, in the real world, and this is what we talked about in this episode, most organizations don't need all of that. So they might need the product catalog, but they just need a place to put in their products. They don't need discount lists and whatever bundles and families, and they don't need all of that. They just need an entity or a record type to store products. So then when somebody opens a case, they can say this particular case or issue is for this product. That's all they want. So you don't need to pay $95 if all you need is a list of products that you sell, right? So, and again, Microsoft is very much like, if that's all you need, you create a custom entity, you can call it products, we don't care, and then just pay us $10 a month to use the platform, rather than paying $95 to use the entire sales app. So that whole episode talks about how we started going about implementing Dynamics, and heavily based on the Power Platform and Power Apps, rather than the Dynamics apps, Dynamics 365 apps. And I still do that today. I rarely approach it and say, you know what, we should implement the Dynamics 365 sales app in this one. Almost never, like no matter who the prospect is, I start with the Dynamics 365 apps. I always start with Power Apps. And then once I listen to a lot more, I might say something like, okay, let's go for a hybrid implementation. One example, we have a customer right now who has a handful of users using the field service app out of the box because they need all or almost all of the functionality, and the rest of the company using a Power App license. So they're paying $10 a month for 90% of their users, and full price for the field service app for a handful of users. That we've done. But for the most, again, it's like a break the glass in case of emergency type of thing. We always, our first step is always Power Apps. And now there's $3 a month. I mean, it's hard to not try to solve the problem with a $3 license rather than recommending a $65 or a $95 license. The number 2 episode on the list is the episode number 59. Top 10 things every solution architect must know. And this is, again, I don't know where I got this idea. It was, one day I was thinking about what episode to record. I think we were having debates about roles at Microsoft for, the new certification exams, which are role-based, like if you're a consultant or a solution architect or whatever. And there were some discussions about what solution architects should know. And some people started throwing, like, in my opinion, again, outrageous suggestions like, solution architects should be experts at creating plugins. Like, what are you talking about? We don't need to be experts at creating plugins. We need to know that we need a plugin, or that it can be done with a plugin, But a developer or a technical architect should be the one creating the actual plugin. They should be the ones making a decision. And maybe they don't think that a plugin is the best bet. Maybe an action is better, or, whatever. Like, let a technical architect do their job. My job is, as a solution architect, is to create the solution, not exactly the moving parts. So anyway, it was a very lively discussion about, like, that's not what a solution architect should do. That's in my opinion what it shouldn't do, or what it should do, or whatever. So I decided to say, well, look, I'm going to record an episode where I talk about, here are the things that I think solution architects must know. And there's another episode that didn't make the top 10 that talks about things that are overrated, that you think that you need to know as a solution architect, and I don't think you should. So like being a developer. Is it awesome if you're an expert developer and can develop your own plugins as a solution architect? Sure. I applaud you for having the knowledge and the know-how to be able to do something like that. But do you have to do that? Will I say that if you don't know how to write a plugin, you shouldn't be a solution architect? Absolutely not. That's dumb. That's just, it's not even on the same league, So because of that, I recorded this episode. If you're a solution architect, or if you want to be a solution architect, this will be a good episode to listen to, because, it tells you the top 10 things I think every solution architect must know, and all the other stuff is kind of just bonus. If you don't know, if you're not an expert on the other stuff, it's a bonus. All right, and our number one most downloaded, most popular, episode ever is episode number 53. Top 10 functional tricks in Dynamics 365. The funniest thing about this episode is that I came up with it, I think it was like a few hours before I had to release an episode. I've been pretty adamant about not missing, ever. I always release every 2 weeks at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, the same day, Sunday, 12 p.m. every 2 weeks, no matter what, for 3.5, almost 4 years at this point. It's going to be 4 years in May. So I've never missed one. I think there was one time that I released one by mistake on a Saturday, like the day before, and people were, sending me emails and stuff and feedback and saying, oh man, I love the episode on like Saturday night. And I'm like, love the episode? What do you mean? It's like, yeah, it was released like earlier today. And I'm like, oh no. So I missed, one of them, which is okay. It was a day early. It's fine. But what I don't want to be is be late. I always want to be on time. So this episode, it was sort of like, I don't know, it was probably Sunday morning, like 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And I'm like, oh man, I really have to record something. And typically I have a list of ideas of things, as I think about them, I just jot it down. I just write it down like, okay, we should do an episode about this or not, or whatever. I write them down. A lot of them don't make it. A lot of them are sort of like, nah, I cannot do a whole episode about this. Maybe a 2-minute Tuesday or whatever, but I'm not going to do a whole hour about this. But the top 10 functional tricks came probably because maybe that week I had been bombarded with, how come you, I think it was a 2-minute Tuesday. I share how I use the functionality in Dynamics in a different way that it was intended for. I think it was probably like importing data and using teams instead of users for ownership if the users no longer work with the company. So that way, if you create a team, they can own the records, but you don't have to use a license. So something like that. Like I used something in Dynamics that was different, that whatever Microsoft intended for me to use it. And people were like, oh, that's awesome. Do you have any other ideas like that? Do you have any other tricks? And I'm like, I have a bunch of them. So I put them together on a list and I talked about it once again without any script or anything like that. Just my top 10 functional tricks in Dynamics, things that I use in Dynamics or I do with functionality in Dynamics that wasn't the intended purpose. So that was basically our most downloaded episode ever. It came out in May of 2019, so about 2 years after the first episode went out, and it's number one on the list of all of our episodes ever. So thank you so much. Also, it's always interesting because I'm always debating whether people want to hear more people on the shows. That is feedback that I received early on. I think I did episode 1 and 2 by myself, and then somebody's like, okay, is this how it's going to be? Or are you going to have guests? Right? So I was kind of getting pressured to bring other people on the show. And I'm like, you know what? I never thought about guests. This was always just an outlet for me to speak my mind and tell what I think about things, and not to interview other people or have other guests. It's not that I'm being selfish. It's sort of like some of the things that I say in this show, other guests perhaps wouldn't say it or wouldn't agree, or whatever it is. And I don't mind saying like Microsoft is wrong on this. And I didn't want to kind of like throw anyone under the bus or bring anyone under the bus with me. So that's why I never really thought about it. But it's funny to see that, let's say if you talk about the top 3, for example, episodes, 2 of them, the first one and the second one, top 1 and 2 are just me without a guest. And then the third one is guests. And the fourth one is guests too. So I guess if you look at the top 4, I have guests on 2 and not guests on the other one. So I don't think people really care whether I'm by myself or whether I have guests. I like to see that the episodes get listened whether I'm by myself or not, and that's the way it should be. And some of these episodes, by the way, are hosted by other people. There are episodes, let me see what's okay, so like episode number 11 on the list is not hosted by me. It's hosted by 2 other MVPs. And it's episode 67, what every solution architect needs to know about Azure. So there are other episodes that are hosted by other people, and they also have a ton of listens or downloads. As you can see, episode number 11 on the list, almost making it on the list, or actually 12th, right below episode 1. Almost made it to the top 10 list, and again, it was hosted by other MVP. So I don't mind having it hosted by other people, and people still listen to it, which is great because it's based on the content, not really on the host. So thank you everyone for tuning in. The last thing I wanted to share, and I don't really know where this is gonna go, but I wrote down the top 3 requests I keep getting for me to cover that I've never done before. So I just want to be transparent about it. If you have these recommendations, it's not that I haven't listened to you. I'm not ignoring you. It's just that I don't know really how to tackle these, and they all have different things. So like by far number 1 on the list is people want me to kind of share my personal story. I've been requested, I don't know how many times now, because people know that I'm not originally from the States. I came from South America, Venezuela, which happens to be a country that is kind of falling apart, and people want to know like why did I leave and when did I leave, and they want a story. But at the same time, it's sort of like, I don't know if anyone wants to listen to my personal story for an hour. I mean, I think that it is kind of an interesting story because I pretty much, like, when I was 22, just to give you the abbreviated, super short version of it, I was born and raised in Venezuela. I grew up. I graduated as a computer engineer, started my own business. I graduated very early. I started going to college when I was 15 years old. I graduated when I was 20, started a business. Even before I graduated, I think I was 19 or 18 when I started the business with a couple other friends. And by the time I was 22, I realized that like the country's going to fall apart and I need to get out of here. So I literally sold everything I own and moved to the States with a bag in my hand and like $3,000 in my pocket. So that's kind of how I got here, like to pursue the American dream. I didn't speak English. I didn't really know a whole lot of people. I had some family members, that lived in Florida that kind of let me crash on the couch for a few months, and that's how I got started. So I got started as an intern who didn't even speak English back in 2005. And then, now I run my own company and I have a practice. So I think people want to know kind of what that journey was like, because yeah, it is an interesting journey. I get it. But at the same time, again, I don't know if this is the right platform for that, and if anyone would tune in to listen to that. So anyway, that's kind of like, it's by far the most requested thing, but I've never really know how to tackle it, or whether I should or not. It's not that I'm ashamed or whatever, or that I don't want to do it. Perhaps it's sort of like it doesn't sound like it's a good fit. Like, I want to keep teaching you guys about Dynamics. I want you to keep getting better as an implementer or better as a customer. And I don't know if taking an hour to just talk about me makes any sense. So that's number 1. Number 2 is people asking about how do you become a solution architect? So like, can you cover it from scratch? Like, what if I'm nobody? What if I'm not even a developer? What if I'm not even a consultant? What if I'm not nobody? I just hear you talk about being a solution architect. Sounds like the coolest thing ever. I'm ready for the challenge. Talk about what I have to do from scratch to become a solution architect. It's another one of those that I don't know how to tackle. I feel like this is a whole series, perhaps a whole show with multiple episodes to talk about how do you go from zero to solution architect. We kind of attempted to do it on the YouTube channel. So if you go to crmmvpmedia.com, it will redirect you to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe there because we post the 2-Minute Tuesday. So every week we come up with tips that we share. But there's also one of the most watched video ever that we have in the channel. And we have, I don't know how many, we have over 100 videos, but I don't know if we're right at 200, but we have a lot of them. The most watched video in the channel is how do you become a solution architect? And it was me and Seth Bacon talking about how do you go from zero to become a solution architect, and kind of give you that story. I think it was over 30 minutes long. It's a long video, or maybe right around 30. So it's a long video that covers that. But again, there's just so many gaps that we couldn't tackle because, I mean, how do you do something that takes most people years? How do you cover that in an hour? It's just very hard. So I haven't really tackled this one. Maybe if you have any suggestions for someone else that could host that show, or that we could collaborate on the show, I will listen to that and maybe we can make it happen. But I do get that suggestion. And then the last one is, can you please share the detailed steps I have to do to become an MVP? I get that suggestion a lot. People want to know, because I am a Microsoft MVP, 9-time Microsoft MVP. People want to know, just give me a list. Like, give me a checklist. You have to do this, write this many blocks, do these many things. Like, and once I do the list, I should be an MVP. That's not how it works. I also talk about that on the YouTube channel. I think the episode that I talk about, or the special video that I talked about there, was something like a magical number. It has magical number in the title. And that's because Mark Smith, who does a lot of mentoring for new MVPs and all of that, or aspiring MVPs, he talked about how he has been able to spot it down to like a magical number of activities, where if you do that, you will get the notoriety to be nominated. Doesn't mean you're going to get the MVP, but he believes that there's a magic number that once you make it to that number, people will notice you and you perhaps will get the nod or the nomination to become an MVP. So I took that and I recorded kind of my own spin, my own version of that. I reached out to Mark and I said, look, I don't necessarily agree with your approach. I'm going to record my own. And he was like, absolutely, do it. So it was kind of like a response to his. And on that episode, I mean, to boil it down to the fact, I basically said, you're not supposed to do the minimum you can. You're supposed to do the most you can. So just because, let's say the number is 40, there's 40 things you have to do or whatever. Now, if you can do 100, you should be doing 100. Knowing that 40 is the number, you should still do 100 if that's what you can do, because you do it because you enjoy it. Just like I record these episodes because I enjoy it. I love the gear. I love recording them. I love the preparation, everything about it. The same thing with the videos. I wish I could get paid to just talk on the microphone like this and record videos. That would be awesome. It would be a great job to have. Not that I hate my job as a solution architect. I love it more than recording videos and recording everything. But I wish I had more time to do it because I love it. And the same thing applies to becoming an MVP. Look, if I release, if you think about it, I don't know, like close to 100 things a year or something. I mean, I guess it's one video every week, so that's 57 or whatever, 54 weeks, and then, or 52 weeks, I guess. I don't remember how many weeks in the year, to be honest. And so I do one of those every week, and then I do an episode of this every 2 weeks, and then I post a bunch of other stuff along the year. So I have no idea how much it is. I just, every time I have free time, I do something because I enjoy it. And that's why that approach of, okay, here's a detailed list of things that you should do to get the MVP. I'm kind of against that, because what that is saying is telling people is that, look, I know you're going to hate it. I know you're not going to enjoy writing these blogs, recording these videos, doing these podcasts or whatever. I know you're not going to like it. But look, if you do 40 of them, you can get the MVP award. I don't like that at all. I think that people like that shouldn't be MVPs at all. I think that there's currently MVPs, not just for Dynamics, but other products as well that are like that. There are the let's do the minimal kind of MVP guys. And, the other MVPs that do the most we can, we kind of know who they are. And, it's easy to spot. And I talked about this on one of the episodes, one of the last few episodes that we recorded, which was talking about things that MVPs don't want you to know or something like that. It's that, look, we know who's legit, we know who's not. That's kind of how it works in the space. So I don't want to put together a list out there that tells you exactly how to become an MVP, because chances are somebody's going to follow that and either A, not get the MVP, not even get nominated, or B, if they do get it, then all the other MVPs who are legit, who are doing the most we can, are going to look at you and be like, okay, I know what you did. So I don't want to fall into that rabbit hole. So I wanted to share the top 3 requests just so, again, what's happened with the show. I think it's important to talk about the things that I haven't even talked about, so you know what people have asked. I don't know if I'll ever cover these topics on the podcast for the reasons that I already explained. But once again, I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who listens to this show. 112 countries, right? Wherever you are, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. I want to make sure that everyone is tuning in to those tips. I don't know how many times I've answered questions on forums and Twitter with just a link to a video on the 2 Minute Tuesday series. Like, people are like, how do I do this? It's impossible. And I'm like, here's the link. You're welcome. So if you just tune into that every week, it's 2 minutes. 2 minutes out of your week. Well, okay, in some cases I go beyond 2 minutes. The point is, it's a few minutes out of your week. You watch that and you can learn something new. Put it in the back of your mind. You don't have to learn every single thing. But then when the problem comes up or the need comes up, you can go back, watch the video, and know how to do it. I've even done that myself. I've been like, oh, I remember I did this a year ago. I just don't remember the steps. Let me go to my YouTube channel, follow the steps. Oh, that's right. You have to select that and click that or whatever. Like, I'll remind myself how I did it because I put it together on a video. So please make sure you go there. crmmvpmedia.com will redirect you to our YouTube channel. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And again, you support the channel and learn something new every week. If you have any suggestions about future episodes or about some of the things that I talked about today, like, oh, why is that in the top 10? Or, where did such and such episode rank on the list of the top 100 episodes? I'm happy to respond to that. Again, my email address is info@crmmvppodcast.com. If you have any questions about the show or comments, feel free to reach out or leave them on the website. crmmvppodcast.com is the website. All of our episodes are there. You can leave comments and I get to respond to them. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again for 100 amazing episodes, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.